we're back on US 50 here in Newton and heading west as we head, the entire trip. We've been in Kansas all day today. And basically, once you get to this part of Kansas, it's I guess you'd consider it Western Kansas. It's pretty much central, but as we get going, it's certainly what people refer to as Western Kansas. Yesterday, once we got going through the day, there were lots of small towns, and there was a lot of really cool old, towns. That's a lot of what we're going to see in Kansas, because there were so many old, pioneering towns here as people were moving west. And Kansas has tons of ghost towns, but it also has a lot of small towns that were built along these roads as they were developing, and some survived and some didn't. And so it's kind of fun to go through and see what's left, or if some of them are still, in good shape, like Newton. Newton's grown to be pretty large. As you can see, we'll hit a few small towns, and then 50 kind of goes around Hutchinson. As we left Newton, heading west on day 2, just along the road, there's this really interesting display of old, gas station and oil stuff. So pretty cool. You can hear US 50 right there. We're literally on it. And it's a good representation of, probably a lot of the history of US 50 with all the old, gas stations and oil company signs. Right here is an interesting part. You can see 50 goes just north of all these towns, and all these towns right here are along the railroad where it says Trail West Road. And I'm guessing that the original 50 probably went through these towns, and maybe they just moved it north later, because you'd think they would go along the railroad there at that time. So we're gonna take that little south detour and check out those towns on through the end of this map over to Stafford. as I'm driving along, I'm finding there are lots of different versions of US 50, and then there's old Highway 50, and then there's a road that'll just say 50. And what I'm assuming is, you know, 50 has had a bunch of different iterations, and now the main 50 is what you see on the maps, which is what I'm driving on right now. But when you follow the railroad, it was probably more along the railroad, and so you'll find, you know, bits and pieces of the old road. But it's not, like, I've not found maps that do a great job of showing, like, all these different options. So I'm just kind of figuring it out as I go. And so, for instance, the next town is St. John, I believe. And it's about 3 miles north of US 50, but it's right along the railroad. And I've also seen parts where it says Old 50 or Old Highway 50 north of this road as well. So we're gonna go ahead and go there because it probably was basically on US 50 at one point. I'm gonna continue, you know, taking little detours like that, and then we get over here to Kinsley. You can see 56, 183. Earlier in the first video, you remember I talked about where 56 and 50 split into north and south, and actually up here, you can see 56 and then 156 branches off there at Larned. 156 was originally just 56, and that was the US 50 North section. And then eventually they made this connection here with Kinsley on 56 and named that 56. And that 156 goes on to Garden City to connect with 50. So different places where these roads eventually later on ended up connecting together. We've arrived to Kinsley, Kansas, and as you can see, we are at the halfway point between San Francisco and New York. Not the halfway point on this trip, or even the halfway point on US 50, but right in the middle of those two cities is Kinsley, Kansas. And very cool town. There's a lot to see. There's a little museum here. I'm gonna wander around and show you a few things. Downtown, there's a bunch of red brick and old buildings that we always love. So show you around Kinsley, and then we'll continue heading towards, I guess you would call it, the western half of the United States. One of the things I really liked about the museum was they had this map from 1886, and obviously that was well before this road. It was 40 years before this road, and probably weren't other roads, or hardly any roads. And you can see where the railroads intersected here, and that's why obviously the roads went along those railroads. But just Cool how the town's built up on the railroad. I always love stopping at a county museum like this, and unfortunately, if I did that all the time, I would never be able to get through the trip. But good to stretch the legs here in Kinsley, and but yeah, let's get back on the road. As we approach Dodge City, you can see we'll make a short little detour down to Fort Dodge. I thought that'd be appropriate since it's right there by Dodge City. 50 goes kind of around Dodge City. We want to make sure we hit that historic area, Wild West town of Dodge City, so we'll show you that. And then we go on through, and there's a couple places here where I will kind of follow the railroad when there's not a town to visit. So you can see there at Ingalls, I'll split off just a little bit. And once again, I'm assuming probably the original road went more along that railroad, and it continues on to Garden City, where you see 156, that was the original US 50 North, and that's where it combines with the 50 South that today is US 50. As we are heading out of Dodge City, literally, we're getting the heck out of Dodge. You can't say that very often. But we run into this little area that talks about the Santa Fe Trail, makes it a National Historic Site. I don't know if it's that there's ruts here. It's hard to tell because it's just you know, undulating hills. And you know, we've been kind of on and off the trail, Santa Fe Trail, for a lot of this trip. And it's been interesting to think this is kind of where, you know, those pioneers and where people were heading back at that time frame. So many people did. And, you know, the terrain gets a little bit hilly here after it was flat for a long time. People don't think of Kansas as having hills, but as you get to the western part, it certainly does. And, you know, they probably started to become challenging. Not like it would be in the future after Kansas, but started to have some ups and downs. So yeah, nice little area. They talk about a lot of the challenges here, and good little area. If you didn't stop in Dodge City and walk around, you can stop here and take a nice little break. We're closing in on the finish of day 2, and it's been a good one. There's been a lot of cool old towns and some historical areas, and I really like that. And I really like Western Kansas as we get out here. It's fun to go to some of these towns I've never been to. I've seen them on maps, and now I can see what they actually were like. Staying the night in Garden City, Kansas, and so we're gonna pop in there, cruise around, see, you know, what the downtown area looks like. Through the rest of this trip, I'm gonna try to stay at the best I can do in terms of finding like an older hotel, maybe a historic hotel, or maybe a one that would be from the era, you know, of when this road would have been hopping, you know. So we'll see if that's the case. That doesn't always mean it's a nice hotel. And you know, we'll come in, I'll give you a little tour of the room at each hotel and tell you how much it costs, and then get some rest. It's been a long day, and good timing. This is ending as some raindrops are starting to hit my windshield. It looks like it is a good time to stop and let this rain blow through and get ready for tomorrow. Welcome to day 3 on US 50. This is our final day in Kansas. We've got about 70 miles to go till we get till we hit the border and start a new state of Colorado. As we've left Garden City, we really start getting into western Kansas, and the Santa Fe Trail, you can see those dots are the Santa Fe Trail. Here in Lakin, once again, the road separates from 50, so as today's US 50 breezes right through there in a straight line, we'll head south, and some interesting places to visit there that follow the railroad that reconnect in Kendall. And then as we get towards the end of the state, there's a couple towns, and our last town before we get to the state line will be Coolidge. Was gonna go up to the Indian mound, but it's a little bit, the grass is a little bit high and I'm wearing shorts today, so probably not gonna do that, but kind of cool. Stop, a lot of stuff about the Santa Fe Trail. Definitely will be a trip I need to do someday. This bridge here is a little wobbly, so not as bad as the swinging bridge in Zinc, Arkansas, but it'll keep you focused. We have made it to the end of Kansas, and now we were literally on the state line. with Kansas and Colorado. Behind me, this is the only thing left of a ghost town called Trail City, which is kind of a Wild West town that was literally on the border, and so they didn't have rules back then. So hopefully you enjoyed our trip through Kansas. Hopefully you'll join me next for the trip through Colorado.